Hello, everyone, and welcome back to For St. Pete's Sake. My name is Christian Hotchkiss. I'm the president of the Stonewall Democrats of Pinellas County and your loving and doting host today. Along with me is my vice president for political action, Laura Gherkin, as always. How are you,
Hi there,
Laura?
Kristen. I'm doing good. I had took Monday off of work because I was out of town over the weekend to Forbidden Kingdom, the festival in Orlando, and so I had 2 short weeks in a row, and now I'm just I don't know, I'm all thrown off. I'm not ready to have
You
to
were
work all
spoiled.
5 days next week. It's gonna be crazy, but
You got to go back to being a full-time employee. Oh my
oh,
gosh.
so overrated.
Oh, I am so excited tonight. As I said, this is For St. Pete's Sake. This is the political podcast out of Pinellas County where we deep dive into everything Democratic in Pinellas, Florida, and beyond. And today we have with us Marialana Kinter, who is running for office.
Yes, Congress in District 7, which is over, for those of us that are here in St. Pete, that's over on the other side of the state, the Sanford area. I believe maybe a little bit of Orlando or mostly just Sanford. But yeah, I've been following Marialana on TikTok and really loved the way that she was communicating with everybody. So I was like, obviously we need to get her on the pod and introduce and interview her. So without further
Absolutely.
ado, Marialana Kinter, hi, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well. I'm excited to be here. I am running in Central Florida's District 7. It's Seminole County and part of Volusia County. So it goes from everywhere surrounding Orlando all the way to the beach.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So let's just start off. Why don't you give us a little introduction to yourself and how you decided to start running for Congress?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, that story goes back very far, so bear with me,
No,
especially
I love it.
as you said, you watch my TikToks and I talk about it pretty honestly, like my childhood and everything. So growing up, I was the youngest of four kids. I still am the youngest of four kids. And our mom, she was a single mom. She had a lot of health issues, and she definitely worked very hard and did her best with us. And it taught us a lot of resiliency watching her go through these struggles and going through them with us. And I worked two jobs in high school to kind of try to escape that cycle and contribute as best as I can. And at 17, when I graduated, I actually joined the Navy to really break that cycle. I joined as a nuclear reactor mechanic, so a mechanic and a mechanical technician for reactor plants. And the training for that, it's 2 years, partly in Charleston, South Carolina, and then upstate New York. So I went down at 17, Charleston, South Carolina, finished part of the training, went to Saratoga Springs and Ballston Spa in New York, and actually got picked up as an instructor there after I finished my training. So I got to stay an extra year teaching civilians, enlisted officers how to safely operate reactor plants before I went to the USS Nimitz. And I went out in 2018 to Washington to the West Coast and stayed over there for 4 years. We went on the longest deployment since the Cold War, actually, the longest ship deployment. It was during COVID, and that's why we
Wow.
didn't pull in anywhere, anything like that. I qualified reactor plant supervisor out there, so that meant just supervising and maintaining and coordinating two reactor plants at the same time. Um, and then I went to New York City and Long Island, where I was a nuclear field scout. So across all of Long Island, New York City, and upstate New Jersey, wherever they needed me that day, I would go talk about nuclear power, protecting the environment, advocate for it, and why nuclear power is good. I talked to thousands of people. I was out there. It's the most populous area in the country. And my whole job was just um, talking to people daily. When I was out there, actually, it's kind of sad. My mom got very sick and passed away. And as anyone who has lost someone knows, you do a lot of reflecting after that. And so I was in this reflective period talking to hundreds of people hourly, and I was seeing the same problems. And as they told me their hopes, dreams, everything they struggled with their family, I was seeing the same thing that I experienced 10 years prior, reflected right back at me, worse than ever before. And during that time period, is when I determined, talked with my husband a lot, and we figured out that when I get out, I want to transition to public service. We weren't sure in what capacity at the time, whether it meant opening a bookstore or nonprofit or investigating how to give back because the issues that were still going on and now are just so crazy exasperated shouldn't be. And I feel like that was my calling at that point. So I got out in 2024 in December, very recently, 6 months ago, and started working at UCF, the University of Central Florida, while I am using my GI benefits, the benefits you get for education when you get out of the school, out of the military. And I was working in a research group that only hires veterans. They're based out of California. They place you with a lab that's near you. And I was working there Monday through Friday. Loved it. The group was great. The research they were doing was awesome, very interesting. And I get a call one day that I'm being dosed. So that was a great catalyst for, well, this chapter is over. Now I can fully commit myself to what I think is my true passion. And my husband had been telling me for a while, this isn't it. You know that you want to do something that means more to you. I can tell. We talk every day. And so that was the real catalyst.
That, I love that you said that you wanted to go into public service, because that's what I think a lot of people that are, that get elected for office and then stay in office for a long time forget that that's what it is. You're public servants and you're supposed to be there to help your constituents who put you there. So yeah, that was, I loved hearing that. And I love, I don't know. I love I have that you're young, like are you technically a Gen Z? Like, I don't know how that.
I think
I think
so.
you're in the right.
I'm 26. I was born in 1998.
Okay, yeah,
And I know that
Gen
Maxwell
Z.
Frost is a Gen Z and he's 2 years older than me. So
Okay. So yeah, that's Gen Z. And you've had a lot of really cool experience in your 26 years too. Like gotten, been able to, like, the nuclear stuff is just, I can't, I barely can do math. So I'm a paralegal. Like I do words, not sciencey things. So like kudos to you.
I loved the nuclear program. I remember being 18 and being in upstate New York and standing on top of a shutdown reactor because part of your job when it's shut down is you have to go in the reactor compartment and after like a certain time period and inspect it to make sure mechanically it's all in order, everything looks great, no changes. And I was standing in between the control rods, just looking around, like, this is crazy. Like, if you told me this when I was 15 or something, I would have told you were smoking crack. This was impossible. And
Yeah.
there I was getting to do it.
Yeah. No, I love that. And um oh gosh. Oh, and then I was gonna say, there was something else I was gonna say. Yes, but obviously, then I also want to say thank you for your service being in the Navy. You are like the third vet that we've had on. Like one that we knew for sure was a vet, and then like it's been so it's very cool to, um. But again, that's like a public service calling. Like I definitely understand that too. Okay, so I know that we've talked, I've seen a lot of your TikToks, but if you don't mind, I'm gonna sort of ask you some of the things that I've seen you post before. I think one of the big things, obviously, like the Doge of it all, there's been a lot of power that Congress has that they've ceded over to the executive. So what is obviously, other than, should we be able to win and get back in the majority of the House? Like what are you hoping to do them? Like what's your number one thing that you want to try to hope to accomplish?
I think right now a gigantic thing that's going on and something that needs to be put to an end, and that's part of the reason we're going to see this huge insurgence of new first-time politicians running for office, is because right now there's an unspoken, unapproved transfer of power to the executive branch. One that Congress, you just said it yourself, is trading over a lot of their power that they're supposed to have without any approval, any laws in place to do that. It's been governance by executive order. I'm sure we're all very familiar with how many come out every week. And so something that I'm definitely going to push for, and I'm sure that there are a ton of, I know there are a ton of people in office already pushing for it, and there's going to be the huge new insurgence of people coming in to also push for it, is restoring the power back to the judicial branch, the congressional branch, and limiting the executive branch the way that it's meant to be. Those checks and balances are in place for a reason, and something that you see in every authoritarian government transcending into the next level of from normal democracy into something that is not that authoritarianism, tyranny, dictatorship, however you want to phrase it, is people willingly handing over their power. A lot of the power that's going there, no one's saying that they have it. They're just saying that they have it. And when there's pushback, we're seeing it already, is they are taking steps back and being like, okay, maybe not. Maybe we won't do tariffs like this. Since you guys said stuff, we won't do it anymore. Their power is only what we perceive them to have. And so the ability to take that back into our own branch is going to be huge in this upcoming election.
Yeah, that is, and that's what it's so frustrating is like, I have a lot of friends that are, very new to the political thing and political scene, and they're just like, well, how can they do that? I'm like, well, they can't, but I guess they are. Like,
Saying they can, yeah. I
nobody's
was a teenager
stopping.
once by being like, no, I can definitely do this because I want.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
they're doing.
And that, and that's like with the Doge job cuts. I had a friend that was also at UCF doing her postdoctoral work, and it was on studying women and violence against women. So, that her grant got doged as well. So it's just I think they're gonna get that money back because of this, this thing called impoundment, which, is when if Congress says money has to be spent on something, the executive branch doesn't then get to like decide. They have to spend, it's like they have to spend that whole amount. So I think, but again, all that stuff's going to have to go through the court. So, and unfortunately, it takes a minute. Yeah, like, so, I don't know. I'm sorry. Yeah, so it does take a minute for all that stuff to go through. So is that like what I don't know, do you have more like anything more specific about how you want to like get the power back? Like is there any like acts or like any pieces of legislation that you would be interested in like introducing or getting on board with other people on?
Absolutely. Real quick, just a tidbit about Doge, because you had mentioned that your friend was there. There's a lot of crazy things going on with Doge that people aren't recognizing. I got told to my face, like, no, they're not cutting any veterans. I'm like, really? Not a single one. And they're
Yeah.
like, nope. And I'm like, really? Like, not one? And they're
Yeah.
like, absolutely. They said no. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, if they said so, all right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So a big thing, right? They're limiting what the normal working class person is entitled to, is able to get in terms of benefits, is able to protect themselves with in the workplace, the whole economy that's built off of working class people, and they're trying to take away their right to organize. They're trying to say you don't have to respect unions. They're trying to allow people who have corporations to break it up into individual smaller businesses to keep them out of the next tier when that is illegal. That's taking advantage of having a bunch of employees and a bunch of working class to then try to get out of your own taxes, which then the taxes contribute back to those benefits that the working class people that you employ are trying to use because you aren't paying them enough money or you aren't providing them proper benefits. So a lot of legislation to protect normal working class people, the PRO Act, which protects the ability and makes it a protected right to have a union, things like affordable health care, but not just through affordable government health care and Medicaid, but allowing Medicaid to negotiate prices on their prescriptions to achieve lower prescription rates, allowing pre-existing healthcare. A lot of people who need healthcare, you're going to have a hard time finding someone who's never had a cold, never had a headache, never
Right.
broken a bone when they were a kid. And to say as you get older, oh, your arm hurts because you broke a bone. Yeah, of course it does, because you're getting older and you have arthritis. That's not a pre-existing health condition that should work against you on your own health insurance. Having protected reproductive health legislation that just in general, when you protect an entire group of people, which is the people who build up the economy,
Mhm.
we're going to have a better nation as a whole. So in terms of those legislations, absolutely. Also big on legislation for veterans' rights. I think that mostly goes without saying, especially against the cuts that are being proposed. We need to completely protect them. And in fact, right now, I went to DC in early May, and one of the people who was with us in our group, has recently developed Parkinson's due to Agent Orange exposure, but it's not covered because he wasn't in the Marine Corps, he was in the Army. And they're also discontinuing in the VA Parkinson's research, which right now there is no cure for Parkinson's. So they're just completely signing a death warrant out for everyone who currently has it. And I know that's a very harsh way to say it, but when you discontinue life-saving research, that's what you're doing, is you're condemning those people to death by taking away their only possibility of survival. And so big on the veterans benefits as well, and the education ones, especially for young people, right? People often act like education's a political football, and investing in a good top tier public education, they want to change it to be unique per state, which takes away universal benchmarks. It takes away people's ability to transfer state to state for colleges or go to elite universities, because if everyone uses their own GPA system or their own class systems or no AP or IB, we no longer have those universal benchmarks. And so instead of treating education like, oh, well, someone else can pay for it, federal doesn't want to, state can pay for it, oh, state doesn't want to, let's have the cities pay for it or the counties, and making it so unique, we need to treat it as an investment in our nation, and that starts with legislation. If the people who are in place to make laws to protect children, the working class, veterans aren't doing that. So I know a lot of people are against endorsing legislation with their name because they're afraid of the lashback and everything. I do not feel that way. I believe that you're being elected to endorse legislation, to be not only representative of your constituents, but also transfer the education back from Washington to those same people. And so in terms of putting my name on legislation, absolutely, I will push for all the legislation that aligns with my values.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, that's really, really awesome to hear. I want to kind of get into this Doge conversation for a second, because this is an honest conversation that we can have on both sides, right? When we talk about waste, fraud, and abuse in the government, we know it's there. On both sides, we can have an honest conversation and say that, yes, there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. But the current setup of Doge is not having an honest conversation. They're not looking in the correct spaces. They're cutting these programs, like you were talking about, the VA benefits, the research for Parkinson's, the nuclear research, like you were in. So talk a little bit about that. What do you see is that something that you're also kind of aware of, and that you, if you get elected, would you work towards that? Again, government efficiency, yes, we can have a conversation on both sides that yes, it does need to happen. How do you see that?
Absolutely. So I do just want to give a disclaimer. The research I was in wasn't necessarily nuclear. It was, I was in a group there that's already established, and they were doing research on carbon fiber and methane. So I just want to give the disclaimer. But in terms of waste, fraud, and abuse, absolutely, it's there on both sides. And I'm a big proponent and very vocal about the fact that both sides need reformation, right? If you're corrupt, regardless of Democratic, Republican, independent, you're corrupt, and that's incorrect. And in terms of waste, fraud, and abuse, we all want to get rid of it, right? No one's gonna be like, oh yeah, I love waste, fraud, and abuse, give me more of it, right? They just need to provide proof. The way that when you make something more efficient, you have tangible proof. And in the military, we have a saying, trust but verify. I'm sure it's across a lot of professions. The inability to provide proof of what you're finding, but being like, no, I promise it's there. We ate that for a few months, right? We were like, well, okay, like it takes time to come up with reports. It takes time for this, but you're saying a lot of numbers. Surely there has to be a report to prove it, right? And we've seen the evasive answers on it instead of a transparent answer being like, we found this, this, and this. It's a lot of evasive maneuvers and like quick head turns, and no, it'll come out. It will eventually, for sure. But still, here we are, and those documents haven't come forward, even when it comes to Senate and committee hearings where they're demanding them. They're saying, we demand within 2 weeks these answers, and it still is not happening. And so I absolutely agree with taking a scalpel, getting rid of as much waste, fraud, and abuse. But part of that is coming up with a viable plan based on real numbers and real things that are being discovered, and preventing. When you're doing that and you're trying to cut gigantic programs that millions of people rely on and are going to leave millions of people not protected in terms of health, food, mental health, anything, medically, anything at all. When you're impacting people's lives, you need to have a plan in place first before you gouge these branches. To be like, Medicaid isn't efficient, so we're getting rid of it and all of you guys are going to be uninsured. No, we're going to, Medicaid's inefficient. We have an approved plan. And does that take more time? Yes. But are we dealing with millions and millions of people's real lives? Also, yes. And that's why we do it. These people are in place to be representative of those people. You can't just put them out like that. The same way as if you're coming up with a grocery plan, you're going to probably make a list before you go to the grocery store. Even
Yeah.
like a small scale, they just aren't doing it on a gigantic scale that affects a ton of people.
I find it so interesting that just a couple of days ago, before he left the White House, Musk turned around and said, "Oh, when he originally came into Doge, he was like, we're going to cut $2 trillion." And just recently, he came out and said, it's going to be more like 160 billion. I'm sorry, guys. And then, swiftly left and got his White House key or whatever the Taco Man gave him. Um, so, yeah, again, there is definitely waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. We all see it. We all know it.
Yeah.
Actively
I
taking care of that is important, but we need to do it in the proper way, like you said.
The thing that I've been hearing about on a lot of like podcasts that I listen to, or like that Ezra Klein book Abundance talked about it too, is that like on it's not necessarily that there's like waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. There's just like a lot of bureaucracy, redundancy, and red tape that make things go like take longer, and they do. And there is, that does cost more money too. And so it's like they talk about California and how the housing crisis in California and how the zoning and the permitting and everything to build like housing is so onerous to get through that it's hindering more housing being, and being built for a state that's in a housing crisis. So I definitely think that there's stuff to fix. I hate calling just because I don't know. I was a public employee for a long time, and people said the same thing about like, and you take that personally. So it's like I don't think public employees are wasteful. I just think the structures of that
Yeah,
we've,
no,
yeah.
I want to be clear that like I'm not calling any
No, yeah.
person wasteful. Some of the positions that we have, and like you said, the red tape that we have is wasteful. And does that come with unnecessary positions? Yes, sometimes. There was one Democratic senator who was elected recently who I believe was a part of the CIA or something, some uh, organization like that, and was like, yes, if you want to be honest about it, there are people in this organization that are all focused on researching like male reproductivity for whatever reason, and the amount of money that we spend on male reproductivity from the military and things like that, like that would all constitute as like waste, fraud, and abuse in a sense,
Right.
under those terms. So it's definitely, like I said, we need to have an honest conversation about that, and we need to have a genuine understanding on both sides of what needs to be done. So it's good to hear that you're willing to have that.
There are definitely a ton of areas where we can cut spending. They like what you just said. There's a ton of contracts out there where we're like, why are we investing in this? Like a lot of
Mhm.
them are misworded to not be representative of what they are funneling money into. And sometimes that's misleading because they can actually be really good programs that are poorly named. But there's also some really good named ones that are poor expenditures of our money. And those are the areas that we should cut. But for some reason, they keep going to the big main ones of like SNAP benefits, Medicaid, veterans
Mhm.
benefits. Well, it's like, well, what about that research you just said about military reproductivity in men? Like, maybe we can scale that one down a little bit and scale some other ones down and continue to spend on the things that are important.
Or, the other thing that
Absolutely.
we can always do when we're running, these big debts is make taxes more in line with, you know what I mean? Raise taxes on people that are making over, in the millions of dollars, like, and not make the poorest of us have to lose our benefits and they're like, yeah, it's just my friend and I were talking about this, the Medicaid work requirements that they're trying to work in. It's like, if you do that, like you have a work requirement to have like to qualify for Medicaid, but then if you work so much, you're gonna make too much money to not qualify for Medicaid, but more than likely you're gonna be at like a lower paying job, so that's not gonna have benefits, so you're gonna lose your benefit. It's just like it's such a circle and of just unbridled greed at this point is really what I think. We've just got unchecked late stage capitalism going on that, the trickle down effect is not trickling.
I think that a big problem that we're seeing when we say tax the rich and people say, well, no, is because they identify with them, which you'll find someone that makes $70,000 when you say tax Elon Musk more, and they're like, no, because when I'm like him, but they don't realize how large the gap is. There's a really good video out there that puts it in terms of like dollar bills, and it's like this is $1 million bills, and it takes up like little shipping pallet, and it's like this is 1 billion, and it takes up a whole stadium
Yeah.
in comparison, or like they do it with gummy bears or a lot of different visuals, and people don't realize the gap between it of like, no, we shouldn't tax people who make $1 billion way more because one day I could be like them, not realizing how almost unattainable it is because we're taught from a very young age about the American dream and how we can just pull ourselves up from the bootstraps and be bajillionaires. And for most people, I speak especially from personal experience, that just is not in the cards for us. No matter how hard we work, no matter how hard anything, especially with them like snipping off our boots and
Yeah.
being like, pick yourself up from the bootstraps. And you're like, I'm barefoot right now. Like you are actively working to make sure I have no standing here. And that's one of the things is people misidentify with them instead of looking around at the hundreds of millions of people who are with them and identify as a group.
That actually is interesting. The class separation of it all, I think is really interesting. And I read this book, The New Jim Crow, a few years ago, and that she really talked about that. Michelle Alexander really talked about that back in the formation of this country, when you had at the same time that you had like your white indentured servants that came over originally with the settlers, and then when they started bringing in the slave trade, and then you had your black slaves and your white indentured servants, and between those groups that greatly outnumbered the rest of the people that were keeping them down, but like the rest, the rich, the bourgeoisie, whatever, convince the white indentured servants that like, well, no, but you could work your way out of it. So you're different, you're better. And it's like, which they couldn't, they were never going to, but it's like they gave them something to think that they were better than another person so that they didn't all come together with class solidarity and overthrow the system. So I do think that that is, it is hard to tell people for you to like, how do you tell that to, adjust that? It's like, what do you tell, because you want to encourage kids. Like I have a niece that's 20, and when she was in high school, everybody wanted her, was encouraging her to go to college immediately. And she's like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I'm not gonna spend all that money to take out loans I don't know what I want to do. And it's like, yeah, so when do you like, and plus it's like, just because going to college and getting a degree is not necessarily, you know, guaranteeing anything. I've got four degrees, one of them being a master's degree, and it's not bougie over here at all. So
Yeah, I think part of that goes into the public schools and the funding and everything, and not providing proper vocational training and exploratory classes for people to determine. We're just providing the core classes and judging it based on that and forcing everyone through, and not providing an opportunity for people to learn about skilled trades and gain. People are like, oh, skilled trades, yeah, they make a lot of really good money, but like I could never get into it because I have no idea how. No one in my family does it, right?
right.
And I know that when I joined the military, I remember I was in AP classes, I was in honors. I wasn't the prime candidate of, and I can say that confidently from speaking with people all the time and talking to people in schools and being like, what do you plan on doing there? Like, I could never go into the military because I'm not stupid. And I'm like, huh, interesting take. And I remember being in my honors US history class, and our teacher, we were watching a video on World War II, and it was people, older gentlemen speaking, and they're like, if you were 16, you lied to go in because you wanted to serve your country. If you were brave, you went into the Marine Corps. And he paused it and he was like, who in here thinks that they could go into the military? And I hadn't said yet that I was going. I knew that I was. I had already been talking to the recruiter. But the whole saying of like, don't put your eggs in one basket, it's a very medically intensive program. I didn't know if I'd get disqualified, anything like that. And the person next to me, I'll never forget, she said, I'm not going because I'm too smart and only stupid people go. And I remember being like, that's how we viewed trade programs.
Yeah.
And now I'm out, and when I tell people that I went as a nuclear mechanic, I get a lot of like, ooh, oh, that's cool. And I loved it. It was 2 years of schooling, and the curriculum is designed by MIT. It's very intensive academically. There's a huge drop rate. And I did hours and hours of studying, more than I had ever done in school before, even being in what I would call rigorous courses. And it's because it wasn't provided. And I went to a school that I think was well funded, that was in a nice area of Charlotte, North Carolina. And even then, it wasn't funded. Trade programs, vocational schools, nothing like that. The only vocational school in the whole district that I remember was in a not great area, and people said if you went there, it like wasn't good and all of that stuff. And I saw it firsthand. We didn't fund it enough then, and we don't fund it enough now. So everyone thinks they have to go into school and they could never go into a trade.
Right.
Sorry, that was a long story.
And that's really setting us up for like in the future to be a majorly behind. Because what are we going to do when we do need plumbers and truckers and
We're
electricians
already
and
there.
and I mean we're seeing them all these industries already be affected by what you're saying, where we just completely did not fund these vocational and trade schools. And my father was an electrician by trade, and my mother was a nurse and went to college, so I've got both ends of it. I've got the importance of both trade school and college education. I see both of it, and that's a whole nother conversation that I can get into at any time. Is the importance of trades and things like that.
Well, part of it goes into what you're just saying, and then people are saying that we want to bring American industry back to America and stop relying on outside countries and everything like that. We bring so much stuff in because we have no manufacturing job. What is a manufacturing job? A trade job, right? People who can actually have skilled laborers. And we outsource a lot of them, and it is a huge contributor of our national debt. And yet here we are not funding the youth to be able to explore that option still.
Yeah, I mean, and I know I had a friend back when I lived in Ohio that she was a teacher at like one of the last stop kind of schools. I think it was a charter school, but it was like you've basically been kicked out of every other school in the area to end up there. And when they did career day, she would do the same thing, like because her kids thought they were like, well, I have to go to, they're like, I don't want to go to college. You go to college like their choices, they felt like were drug dealer or college. That's all they knew, like to pick from. And so she had tradespeople come in, like electricians and plumbers and mechanics and, just like anything different, and like have them, and they were like, and kids were like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. It's like, I mean, if you yeah, and that was just having speakers come in. If you had like opportunities to actually learn some of those trades while you're in high school, start some of your apprenticeship or the work that you have to go through to get your certifications, that it makes sense to me too. But who are we? Well, this is why we have people running for Congress, so that we can make these changes.
Yeah, it's super anecdotal, but a lot of the people I went to high school with, the ones who are well off now and doing great and not in crippling student loans, are the people who started their own businesses and went into skilled labor. Is exactly what you were saying. And at that time, people like looked at it like a last stop, exactly what you said. And now those people have successful businesses, and we're at 10 years out of high school and they're expanding them. But when they did that at first, everyone was like, wow, you're not going to college?
Right.
Maybe, like, but yeah,
Yeah,
exactly what
plus,
you said.
yeah, that's also they, thinking about that, doing like not only are they doing like the trade worker, but then they're an entrepreneur on top of that, which like is its own whole other thing, which another way that my brain just does not work. I tried it for a hot minute and I'm just not good at that. I'm just good at yapping. So
Well, We're all a little good at yapping.
I'm a
And
yapper.
that's why we have the podcast. That's why we have
Exactly.
the podcast. We're here to yap. But I do want to kind of move us along, and it is June, so it is Pride Month, and this is the Stonewall Democrats podcast. We are the LGBTQ caucus here in Pinellas. So I want to ask you, and this is something I'm going to start asking all of our guests during this month. What's your relationship with the community, and what does Pride mean to you as a straight ally? It seems. Um, yeah.
So it's very personal for me. I grew like we moved around a lot growing up, but it was always Midwest, Montana, Ohio, and then in the Bible Belt, Charlotte, North Carolina. We moved there when I was in second grade, and it is relatively conservative. There are areas that are more developed, more progressive, and I will say I'm very lucky to come from a progressive family. And no one in my family, since we aren't directly from there, no one in my family is crazy either way. And I just come from a very progressive, liberal viewing family, which I'm very thankful for. I grew up closeted bisexual in high school and middle school, and I didn't actually come out until I was 18 and I had left and joined the Navy and realized like, oh, I can do whatever I want. Like I can be who I want to be without being ashamed or being fearful. Because even at school, I did extracurriculars and people would start with a prayer or want to pray for good luck. And I grew up very Catholic in our family, and which I know is very weird because I just said it was progressive, but it was also Catholic. And so a lot of mixed feelings there, a lot of confusion there. But at school, I was openly like, I'm not religious, no thank you. But every time they would start with a prayer, and before competitions, they would pray, and you had to be aware of like the social aspect of being like, I'm not going to do that, and you get judged and everything. So I was very, very artistic, very openly expressive, thanks to my family. Like when I was like, I want to get a buzz cut, they were like, do it, I'll cut it. Like very good. And actually, when I came out at 18 and I told my family, they were like, yeah, we know. Like you had a buzz cut last year and you only wore rainbow clothes, but like we want you to be you. So whatever you say.
Yeah.
And even now, I got married pretty young. I married my husband. We've been married for 5 years, so very young. And even sometimes in the military, when I was like, oh yeah, I'm bisexual, and they're like, no, you're not. You have a husband. I'm like, oh, you're right. That means that I am not bisexual. That's crazy. I'm
Yeah.
sure now that you're married to your wife, you aren't attracted to women anymore, just your wife, right? And they're like, no, I'm heterosexual. I'm like, oh, okay, so it works only for you. Got it.
Right.
So it was a big part of my identity and very emotional journey, as it is for most people, right? It's a journey of self-discovery, everything like that. So for me, it's not just allyship, it's a part of who I am. And so my stances on it are very firm that everyone, regardless of sexual orientation or how they identify or gender fluidity, deserves protected rights and are a valued member of the community, not just the LGBTQ community, but the whole entire national community. They've always been there. Before there was an LGBT group, gays, trans, bisexuals were there for as long as people have existed. It's not just the gays community, it's the whole community. It's not objectified like that. And they love doing that. It's part of having a boogeyman and an enemy.
Yeah.
And the gays are unfortunately one of them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do want to apologize. I did not mean to assume you as a straight woman. I do
No,
apologize.
you
That
are
is
good.
my bad.
You know what? It's so interesting because in my friend group, I've got like several bisexual women friends, and so I've been doing so much more learning and discovering about like, the struggles and the assumptions and just like the thing, the way that and that bisexual, pansexual, queer, however you want to identify, and that, like that's I don't know, it's not we got some work to do in our community too to be respectful to, everyone under our flag as well. Because I know I've seen Christian, I know you shared on social media, there's been some very like transphobic stuff happening in the community too, which is just
We've
like,
had we've had some sponsors who have given us money in the past as the Stonewall Democrats come to me and say, and then I know this is an issue that Tampa had as well, Hillsborough had as well, where they said they wouldn't donate to us again unless we got rid of the T in our name. So there's a whole section of people within the community and without
Yeah.
who are truly trying to erase part of our community. And again, back to having genuine conversations. There's a genuine conversation to be had about pedophilia and child abuse and things like that, but not when it comes to not just this over like over assuming generalization of queer people, trans people. These
Gay
people
men.
are all
Yeah.
bad because
Mhm.
they changed their gender or things like that. Like, no, there is actual scientific evidence that trans people have always existed, gay people have always existed, bi people, lesbians, queer people, the whole plus, we've always been here.
Yeah.
And now that we're finally finding our voice, and now that there's finally more of us coming out and being comfortable in it, now it's a problem. So,
Well, and that's, something that I like to, that I remember and I post about every year during Pride too, is that Pride was started by a riot at the Stonewall Inn, and that riot was started by a black trans woman named Marsha P. Johnson. Like, she kicked off in the most hardcore way possible, the gay liberation movement. So, like,
it was lesbians and trans women that did it, that
yeah,
started the entire gay movement.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I will give them their props and flowers every time I can because it was truly lesbians and trans women that started the gay movement.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, but yes, it is happy Pride to all of us, and thank you thank you for sharing that, you're in the community too. That's super fun. We love that. But like you said, we're all the community. Like we are little, we are a sub community, but like when ultimately we're all a part of the same, world, state, county, city. We all need to love and respect each other regardless. So
The main reason I
We're all
just
part
make
of
the
one race. Oh, sorry.
oh sorry, the main reason I make that specification of it's there is like an LGBT community that is very loving and very great, but it is part of the bigger community is because something we see repetitively in almost as a cycle is they like marginalizing people and then they make them their own community and it's no longer taking away healthcare is no longer a social welfare issue. Now it's a gay people issue or now it's a Hispanic issue and not
right.
providing people due process is no longer a community concern. It's a only if you're Hispanic concern. That's the only reason I specify that I believe it's part of a bigger community too, because when we take away their ability to divide us like that, we make it forced that these aren't just issues that affect one group. If they take away my healthcare, they take away your healthcare. And if they take away mine, they take away my very straight husband's healthcare. It's
Hmm.
not just that's the only reason I make that specification is because they will try to divide us based on that to make it a very specific issue instead of what it is, which is a national one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes is, and I forget her name, but she's a teacher who went around and taught this, and she was always said, "We're all part of one race, and that's the human race, and we're all the same. We all bleed red. We all break bones the same way, and we're all humans. So an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. At the very end of the day, when it comes to our social liberties and our basic justices to live our lives as we see fit and we're allowed to, as long as we're not harming other people, which the vast majority of our community don't, and then there's examples given of like people that do harm other people, and it's like, yes, we can come up with a million different examples from the straight community of people, harming kids and harming their family and everything like that. So it's not a gay issue, it's not a lesbian, trans, queer, it's an all of us issue, and we really have to get on the same page in that sense when it comes to social justice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. People really forget and that that's the American way is to provide people those liberties regardless of how they identify and that's why people came to America in the first place was to escape a bunch of different types of persecution, mainly religion, and being like, I want my own religion, I want to go here, I want to do things differently, I want to go here. And the ability to have individual and family freedom to choose your own options and what's best for you based on your beliefs is the American way. And why are we trying to change that now? Why are we trying to change the freedoms that we are rightfully deserving of from being here? Like
Right.
it's something that I think is big right now, is trying to not recognize that the American way is the way of freedom and choice.
Exactly.
Well,
Okay, so I think, oh wait, go ahead, Christian, go ahead.
no, I was going to say I don't have another question. If you have
Okay.
another question or anything, go
No,
ahead.
I was gonna say I think we can probably move on to our final segment, which is our shout out or shut down. So what we do with this is that we just give a little news story, a little shout out, a little political situation, whatever it is that is either giving you joy, making it positive, your week positive, or if you want to be petty and give a shut down, which I've done, I get really petty in mine. Feel free to do that. So, Christian, do you want to go with yours first?
Sure, absolutely. So I have a shout out to a state representative from Missouri. And if you have not heard of this person, please look her up because she is like everything that I've seen from her. She is the next person that we're going to see out of Missouri. Her name is Rachel Prouty. She's the state representative who represents northern St. Louis County as far as I can remember. And she came out with a blistering attack on the House floor of the Missouri State House against Republicans who were there to cut taxes on low income individuals and give tax breaks as far as like circuit breakers and things like that. There's an actual video where she talks and um, the Democrats didn't go for it because it was attached to this much larger spending, these much larger cuts to taxes of the rich, and so obviously, like the Democrats were not for the tax cuts on the rich; they were for the tax cuts on the lower class. And she points that out because there was actually a young man from St. Louis, somewhere around there, who was another representative who his first bill filed was to eliminate the exact taxes that on the low and middle classes that were being eliminated in this tax, except it was solely by itself. And the
Mhm.
Republicans in the entire House voted against it. And so it was truly a matter of wild
Yeah.
wild thing. So anyway, look up Rachel Prouty, Missouri State Representative. She is absolutely incredible. She is a voice for the people. She is a millennial. She's a Black woman. She is absolutely amazing. So please, everyone, look her up. I want to reach out to her and hopefully get her on the podcast at some point because I want to hear her. I want to talk to her. I am such a fan. So
Cool. Awesome. I love that. I love just the opportunity. And this is why I love TikTok, even though I know that's, anyway, that I'll just go next because that is my shutdown. My shutdown is TikTok and specifically on this video that I saw last night, which is a really, really good video. It was, I can't remember the creator's name, but he was talking about how close the slide we are on to authoritarianism. And when I saw the video, it had like 2.8 million likes on it. And I watched the whole thing, 10-minute long, watched the whole thing, went to share it, and a screen popped up and it was like, verify. Are you sure you want to share this to you should verify your sources? And I was like, what? I've never seen this before. So I clicked off of that and then I went to go send it to a couple of my friend groups and it was like, you can only send this to one person at a time because it's disinformation. I was like, oh my gosh. It was the biggest, like, I mean, we've all known how the platform has changed since it went dark in January and, the algorithm is different. But that was the first time that I've been like, oh, they really are suppressing. And I've heard that the algorithm in America is being suppressed to not know how many people in like across the world are speaking out against everything that's happening here and supporting, regular American people. But to see that, I was just like, whoop, okay, all right, now great. Thank you. Take out my one little place that I can rot and feel happy in the world, and you're ruining it. But anyway, so that was my shutdown. So you can go ahead with yours, Marialana.
I'll give a shout out. I was at the Daytona Area Democratic Club last night, and it was at Red Lobster, so that was nice. Great biscuits. But there was a woman there, and she described herself as a 60s girl, so that's not me saying that. She grew up during the civil rights era, and she was active in it. And she's a Black woman. And she told us, she was like, anywhere they said we couldn't go, I was there. And when they said we couldn't move into this neighborhood, me and my sister moved right in. And hearing her stories, of her facing adversity firsthand, especially because I'm sure you guys experienced this in Florida, not to that extent, obviously, but Florida is growing in hostility towards different beliefs. Even neighbors you have that you once got along with might be more hostile now on a obviously smaller scale compared to the civil rights movement, smaller scale right now. But hearing her stories and her personal bravery of facing those adversities, it was really inspiring, and it put a lot of things into perspective of being like, and she was like, we're not there yet, but might be where this is going again. And she was ready to face it head on once more. And that's my shout out. Talking to her and hearing her stories was incredible. I could listen to her for hours.
Amazing.
Awesome. I love it. I hope to hear more stories like that. We definitely need to hear more grassroots organization people like that who are on the ground, who have faced it, who have been here for the fights through civil liberties and everything like that. We definitely need to hear and boost their stories more often. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate it. It's been absolutely amazing, Marialana, and I cannot wait to see what you do on your campaign trail and where you go, and hopefully District 7, I don't know how far one way or the other that is, because I got to be honest, I did not fact or do my research. I do apologize. But hopefully they are, they're open and receptive to your message, because it sounds like it's a really good one, and I can't wait to see what it does in the future.
Thank you.
So that's all we've got for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in again for St. Pete's Sake. Please remember to like and follow us. We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at For St. Pete's Sake. That's for Saint.Pete's Sake. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen. If you want to throw a rate and review on the podcast or on the YouTube, that would be amazing. Help get us some more exposure. We would love that too. We'll be back next week with more stories from the people that work hard to make our community better. Until next time, for St. Pete's sake, keep pushing for change.